I thought of a new title. October Horror.
October what?
Horror.
Do you want to explain that one, or?
Yeah.
What do you mean? And every year, October, it goes bad. We know how this is going to end.
Oh, horror?
Horror.
Oh, horror.
I heard it.
What do you guys think?
I heard
Get
something different.
your bugs out of the gutter. My God.
Hello and welcome back to the LA Times' Dodgers debate. I'm Jack Harris, joined by our sports columnists Bill Plaschke and Dylan Hernández. Before we start, congratulations to Bill for his award from the APSE last week. Bill, how was North Carolina?
It was great. Thank you, Jack. Are you being held hostage somewhere?
I'm coming to you from my in-laws' basement in Bloomfield, Iowa. So, no, the opposite of being held hostage.
So
But,
you're in
yeah,
the field of
different
dreams.
backdrop.
You're in a basement of
Close.
dreams.
This is going to serve as sort of our midseason review of the Dodgers, who have been good. They're in first place. They have a big division lead. But as we've talked about on past episodes, a lot of little things have popped up, reasons to concern for their October chances. Despite that, I mean, look, like looking at Fangraphs today, they have a 99.4% chance to make the playoffs, a 94.7% chance to win the division. They have the best World Series odds at any team in baseball, which is a little surprising to me, but speaks to, how highly this team is still, I think, viewed by computer models, by, people around the industry. So like, I ask you guys, like when you watch these games right now, what are you watching for? Are you already counting down to October? Are you watching these games through the prism of what they need to do at the deadline? Are you just watching them because you're such big baseball junkies and can't go a night without Dodger baseball? I mean, what is it that you're looking for in these games when right now with a team like this that, at the end of June is already kind of coasting to a postseason spot?
Dylan, you can start.
No, I'll defer to the Red Smith Award winner.
I'm watching the Phillies, to be honest. I'm not even watching the Dodgers that close. I'm watching the Phillies. It's all about there are 4 games behind the Phillies. I think they have to get home field advantage against the Phillies to win to go to the World Series. I don't think as constituted with the problems they're having with Mookie, with Yamamoto, with Clayton Kershaw having a setback. I think their issues are big enough that I don't think they can beat the Phillies in Philadelphia. And I think they need to get home field advantage. That's their only roadblock to the World Series. Clearly, there's no other team that's even close to those two teams.
Yeah, I'm just kind of looking ahead to kind of October, right? I think the playoffs are kind of a given at this point. And look, the problems that they've had are things I think we wrote about, frankly, before the season even started, right? The top heavy nature of the lineup, the fact that the defense sucks, the fact that they cobbled together this rotation of a bunch of guys that get injured, with Yamamoto down now, he was obviously kind of the leading candidate to be kind of that number 2 guy that you pair with Glass now at the top of the rotation, with Buehler having a setback, Kershaw now having a setback, right? The list of candidates to fill that position are starting to shrink. So, you could very easily see them getting eliminated in a similar way to, that they've been knocked out in the past. So to me, that's a little bit disconcerting. And yeah, everything is about, it's all leading up to October, right? And the trade deadline is kind of a part of that. And now, I think between kind of that high-end starter, maybe a shortstop, maybe another bat, right? You have to kind of start prioritizing, I think, where, you're going to commit your resources if you're the Dodgers, or if you're going to even do that at all, right? I mean, we've seen years where, they've kind of decided, what, we kind of have to, keep our prospects, whatever, even though none of these guys seem to pan out. So yeah, I think it's all about October at this point. Fair or not, that's kind of the standard that's out there. I in a way think fans here are a bit spoiled in that, right? The team's going to the playoffs every year, but hey, you know what? Look, they've raised the ticket prices accordingly, right? The ticket prices reflect those expectations. And I do think everything's about the World Series. It's a World Series or bust type season every year for them.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you, Dylan. Like, it's like the trust meter, right? It's between now and the end of July. Do you trust Gavin Lux to be your everyday second baseman, or do you have to go a different direction there? Do you trust Andy Pajes to be your everyday center fielder, or do you have to make a change there? Do you trust the guys that are filling out some of the rotation depth Walker Buehler when he comes back, Clayton Kershaw, who's got injury questions right now. James Paxton, is that a guy you can foresee relying on at least to get to the end of the season, right? I think when it comes to some of the bigger picture stuff, and we'll get into the deadline more in a minute, I obviously, if they can make a splash, that's going to be helpful. I don't know how many there are going to be to make, but at least for now, that's kind of the nightly thing is who are the guys you can count on? Who are the ones that you can't? Because I do think the roster, even if they don't make a big splash, is going to look at least somewhat different post trade deadline, even if it's just with smaller moves. And it's about between then and now kind of figuring out who do you trust, who do you count on, who do you need to replace then. But real quick, Bill, so you think the Dodgers have to finish above the Phillies in the National League standings? Because while I agree with you mostly on the Citizens Bank Park point, like the Arizona Diamondbacks, not exactly a juggernaut last year, did go in there and win. So it's not impossible. But you think they have to be the top seed in the National
I just
League?
don't think they have it. I think they need to get Dodgers to have home field advantage. I think that's huge for them. And the Phillies are home now. They're a better team than they were last year. They're a better team than they were 2 years ago. They've been here 2 straight years, been on the cusp of greatness. This feels like their year. And I feel like the Dodgers need to do something to trade deadline. I think that's I think that's huge. We can talk about that now. I mean, I think they need to get a starting pitcher. I don't trust Gavin Stone's been great. Do we trust him in the playoffs? Do we trust Paxton in the playoffs? Do we trust Bobby Miller to come back? Do we trust Buehler? No. Do we trust Kershaw? No. I mean, who do you trust besides Gladstone? Are we all waiting for Gladstone for the other shoe to drop? Are we waiting for him to get hurt like he always does? I mean, hopefully he doesn't, but there's issues there. And I think they need to get, as far as shortstop, I like Miguel Rojas as shortstop. So you get Mookie back, you move him to second base, and all's well. I think they're fine there. I think they need a starting pitcher.
That's kind of the obvious one. Yoshinobu Yamamoto's status right now is still very much unclear. You don't know when he's going to start throwing again. You don't know how well the shoulder is going to recover. Even if he does come back, if the stuff's going to be there to count on him in the playoffs. Like you said, Gavin Stone, Bobby Miller, guys with good stuff that have shown flashes of being maybe in that realm of pitcher in their young careers, but that's kind of a big thing to be relying on. And then kind of the same thing with Walker Buehler and Clayton Kershaw, where two guys that have done it, but are really far from being anywhere near peak performance. I think the biggest question is, like, is that guy actually going to be available out there? I think Garrett Crochet is the one name who's been healthy this year, who's been dominant this year. He's the AL strikeout leader for the White Sox. But, that's a guy with 2 or 3 years of team control left after this, who's going to be really expensive to get. I think the same thing kind of applies to the hitting market where, Luis Robert is a pretty good option out in the center field, but that's a guy who's got kind of a big contract left. I think it's $18 million this year and some $20 million next year. There's not a lot of impact moves, I think, that are going to be obvious. And it's going to leave the Dodgers in this place where, I think, quite frankly, like, if they were going to be aggressive, they should have just been aggressive sooner. They should have been aggressive back in the spring to go get a shortstop, to go get a Dylan Cease or a Corbin Burns or somebody that you'd really like to have now, even if it meant giving up a lot of prospects back in the winter. They didn't do that. And it leaves you in a spot now where it's how willing are they to overpay for high impact talent? Because in their view, in the Dodgers' view, Andrew Friedman, Brandon Gomes, like, to go get a Garrett Crochet or a Jesus Luzardo, if you trust him to be healthy, like, it's going to cost a lot, because the guys who are out there who are a real, legitimate postseason difference maker are not only really good players, but they're not pending free agents. Like, all the really good pending free agents who are usually gettable this time of year have either moved or probably aren't going to. And it puts the Dodgers in this position that I think on the one hand, you can maybe rationalize and say, okay, if you don't go and make a big splash, if you don't send 2 or 3 top prospects to the White Sox to get a Garrett Crochet or, a top prospect or 2 to get a Luis Robert, you can understand it. You can make an argument for it. But it's kind of this question we've been asking for a lot of years with them now, which is, are they going all in? Are they viewing this as a championship window? And, if not, then, like, what was the point of spending $1.5 billion this offseason, right? Like, to me, it goes back to the winter. When you make the kind of commitments you did this winter, when you spend the kind of money you did, you are in all-in mode now. Like, you should look at this team 3 or 4 years from now. Mookie Betts is going to be in his mid-30s. Freddie Freeman's going to be out of contract in his mid-30s. Tyler Glasnow is going to be in his mid-30s. Like, this is your window, almost certainly, unless you can develop a lot of young talent in the next couple of years, which it's not clear that they're going to get a ton of, future all-stars and Hall of Famers coming through their pipeline. So it puts the team in the spot where they're going to have to do something that they don't typically do Like under Andrew Friedman, what have been the really big midseason trades, right? It's been Darvish, it's been Machado, and that one was for a kind of a 1-for-1 injury replacement. And then it's been Scherzer and Trey Turner. And even that one was sort of a half injury replacement when Seager went down in 21. So it does not feel to me like a trade market that's going to lend itself to the Dodgers making a big move. And I think, again, if you're the Dodgers, you can sort of explain that by saying, look at the market, look at the prices, nothing lined up for us. The problem with that is you've built this team in a way that it's like, if you don't take advantage of this year, if you don't take advantage of next year, like what was the point of spending all this money outside of, growing your brand in Japan or something like that? So that's where I look at this deadline and what's going to be really tricky for this team. And they're going to have to decide how committed they are to doing everything possible to try to win a World Series in the next couple of years. And to be fair, like each of those 3 trades we just mentioned, like they didn't win a World Series in either of those years, but they went a lot farther in the playoffs than they did the past 2 Octobers. They put themselves in position to do it. And I think if you don't do it this year, like that's a really big gamble. It's more likely that they make some marginal moves. They try to clean up the bottom of the lineup. They maybe try to go get maybe like a Jack Flaherty, a pitcher of that ilk who's good and can maybe, be like a Jordan Montgomery was last year for the Texas Rangers, kind of emerged as a postseason star. That to me seems like the path they're likely headed down at this point. But if they do go down that path, it opens up a lot of questions about what they're trying to do and why they haven't done more, even on top of all the winter spending, to make sure that all that winter spending wasn't done in vain.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of answered your own question in the middle of that, right? I mean, they spent that money to make more money, right? I mean, I think, and we got to remember too that 700 they gave Ohtani is not really like a 700, right? I mean, it's so heavily deferred, and I'm just kind of going back based on history, right? I mean, Plaschke and I have talked to Stan Kasten a number of times over the years when they've had kind of these off seasons where the fans were expecting things and they did nothing. And he kind of very arrogantly, like, it's almost like fans are upset. Like, what are you talking about? We sell out every game. And you know what? To some degree, he's right. I mean, the fans are kind of like letting them kind of get away right with this, right? They're
a lot of City Connect jerseys were sold this week.
It doesn't matter how much they raise these ticket prices. I mean, people still keep showing up, right? I mean, it's hot as crazy, right? I mean, right now, especially this past homestand, I mean, it was hot out there. People are still out there paying whatever they are for their seats, and so, yeah, I think it's gonna raise those questions. But I think honestly, we kind of already know the answer, and maybe this is where you kind of need, and I don't think that this is kind of part of his culture or his personality, but you know what? If some guy is in position to make demands, it's Ohtani, right? I mean, he basically is in. You could argue he's almost playing for free in a way, I mean, he can go to them and say, hey, you know what? I did this, right? And, with his, right, he can kind of leverage his status in the game and, maybe be that presence that kind of like LeBron is with the Lakers for the better or worse. But I think without some worse, according to Flash. But
all right. Well, so Dylan, would Ohtani do that? Would Ohtani go to them and say, "Give me a star, give me the World Series"?
I don't think from year one he would. I think maybe if they go like a few years without winning one, and all of a sudden, I mean, he's so legacy obsessed that, maybe if it gets pushed down to like a certain point and he starts thinking maybe this isn't ever going to happen for me, I could see maybe, but yeah, it would be very much kind of out of the, again, you got to remember, like in Japan, right? I mean, the team just they don't have agents over there. They just tell you how much you're going to make that coming season. They claim to be fair about it, but like there's no negotiation over there with anything. So I just kind of, that said, I do think Ohtani, part of the reasons he's successful is he can kind of break out. He's not as shackled, I think, by his culture as many, a lot of other people are, anytime you kind of like leave your country, right? And I certainly feel it every time I leave this country. It's just how American I am and stuff. He seems to kind of be, not as like concerned with that and kind of easily adaptable. So, maybe in a few years, but I don't see it this year for sure.
Now, Jack was talking about the years going on, the players getting older. Let me ask you guys this. In a small way, is Freddie Freeman starting to show his age?
Yeah, I think so.
And that's huge. That is huge for the future.
Well, you know what, though? I do think, though, he's not going to just kind of fall off a cliff like we've seen some guys do. I mean, that swing is just so short, right? I mean, we're talking about him having a down year. Jack, what's he hitting right now? Like 300? you know?
It's not really a down year anymore. I mean, to your point, I think that was a fair question a month ago. In June, I mean, it's been his best month of the year. He's back in top 10 of OPS in the National League. He's above Mookie Betts in OPS right now. You know, he's changed some things. I think he's at that stage where it's like it's just taking more prep work, more, you know, before game stretching and calisthenics and those sorts of things. I think his level of play is maybe a little down from the last couple of years, which were the best 2 years of his career, but are still at a point where, you know, he's, at least in a regular season, is giving you everything you want. Now, he's another one of these guys who's kind of, at least last year, struggled in October. But, you know, again, that's why, like, right now, to me, you're asking these questions, right? You're wondering, when is Freddie Freeman's production going to start to slide drastically? You're wondering about Mookie Betts at some point, because he's 31 right now and is changing positions, and, you know, has still been, for as hot as he started the year, cooled off a little bit. You know, Shohei Ohtani he's 30 years old now, or is about to be 30 years old. So again, like, to me, this is the kind of confounding thing with the team, is you have to recognize that you only have this level of production from these players for so long. And while it's put you on par with every other big club in baseball, clearly you can still do things, add around them to give yourself as good of a shot as always. This gets back to, like, the crapshoot theory, right? The Dodgers look at playoff baseball as sort of there's a lot of randomness involved. It's short series. It's one bad week where you don't hit with runners in scoring position and your season's done. But there are, like, ways you can pad around that, right? Like, you can go to the craps table with more chips to ensure that, all right, even if you lose a couple rolls, like, you're not completely out of the game. And that's where, again, it gets to this question of me of how willing are they to go back to the ATM again and withdraw more cash and pay the $7.99 Vegas ATM fee to keep playing, because, you know, that's probably what you have to do to give yourself as good of a chance to win in October. And this deadline, again, it's like, it's going to be hard to go get impact guys. But I think at this stage of the season, you can make a really compelling case that, yeah, you need to go get another real frontline starter. You probably need to go get another quality bat, especially, by the way, with Max Muncy's status. Like, he'll be back at some point, but he's now missed 2 months of the year. So, you know, who knows if he's going to come back and be as productive as he was back at the start of the season.
Yeah, you know, and I know we're talking here about, like, Freeman and Betts and their decline, but, right, I think the guy that could have, like, the sharpest decline when he does decline is Ohtani, right? It's a longer swing.
He's so good, though. I would say that he's not even close to there yet. He's
but we're talking, I mean, how much, what do you think? Like 4 more years? I mean, there are not many guys that are, like, great at 35. I mean, he might be, right? I mean, he certainly takes care of his body enough, but I don't think it's one of those things that you can really, like, you know, you can't really take it to the bank either, you know? And they're also kind of like tiers of kind of top tier production, right? Like right now, you know, to Jack's point, I think he's got, you know, you could look at it and, okay, if he stays healthy, you probably got like 3 years of him being the best player in baseball, you know? But yeah, you know, and a slight drop off from that is a bit of a drop off, you know, and I think, especially if you're counting on him, you know, just based, you know, the little we've seen on him, you know, in Japan and at the World Baseball Classic, of the kind of that big game experience. If this is a guy that you're gonna, you know, not just rely to get through the 162 games of the regular season, but also to carry you in October, yeah, you know, to Jack's point again, I think that window's shrinking.
And it's just you're already seeing with this team, like, some of the, and on a much smaller scale, but like some of the problems that the Angels had when they had a bunch of high payroll guys that they were relying on, which is, it's harder to build depth around the rest of the team, right? There's a reason why they're still not giving up on Chris Taylor, in part because they don't want to have to eat all of the money that's still owed to him over the next couple of years before that they're sure that they're not going to get production out of him. Like, they're already starting in little ways to be a team that, for all the money they do spend, you know, is a little bit confined by, okay, well, if we add player X for $10 million with the luxury tax, that's really $20 million. And is that really what we want to do? Or can we try to, like, you know, piece it together in other ways, which, again, the best thing that the Dodgers do is figure out all those little ways to piece things together. But I think you're already seeing with this team that if you were to drop them into a postseason series next week, even with a healthy Mookie Betts, there are ways that you can get to them, right? There are ways that you can attack them. You can shut down the bottom of the lineup. Like, they were kind of a mediocre offense for a month there, because the bottom of the lineup wasn't hitting and because their top players weren't playing at MVP levels. So like the difference between this team being like an elite, clear World Series contender and something closer to the version we saw maybe last year, which was a 100-win team, but one that we never really believed was going to make a super deep October run. Like it's not that different. And that's why, again, like it can be difficult to like analyze this team sometimes because we are poking at the margins, but like that's the margins are where you win or lose in October.
Are there any concerns with the bullpen?
I feel good about the bullpen. You know, Evan Phillips still a really good closer. Alex Vezina has become one of the better lefties in baseball all of a sudden again. You know, Brusdar Graterol, they're planning to be back at some point. Daniel Hudson and Blake Trinan have been really good. And then, you know, if maybe Walker Buehler moves down there, if he can't get things figured out in the rotation, maybe that's where Dustin May goes when he comes back from injury. Like, I think they're going to have enough arms there to where you're not going to have to worry about the bullpen. So, like similar with the bottom half of the rotation, like there are going to be enough arms to like cobble together production, dependable production. Now, maybe you can go add another lefty. Maybe, you know, if there's a good deal out there for somebody, you can make an ad there. But I look at the bullpen as like the most sort of cemented part of this team outside of the top four of the lineup.
Now, one question I guess I have, right? Plasch, you I think brought this up at the beginning of the season. I think you wrote a column about this, about Dave Roberts and kind of his status. Given just kind of how like obvious, right? And I think, you know, in the last couple of years, there's been like a slight shift even among the fan base, right? Whereas everything was Dave Roberts' fault, you know. But I think the last couple of years, again, the shortcomings of the roster have become so pronounced to where it's like, well, maybe the front office deserves some of this blame. Now, granted, I think with Ohtani's contract structure, right? I'm not saying Andrew Friedman's going to go anywhere, but if they kind of look like this and get knocked out in a similar way to they did last year and the year before, is Roberts really gonna take the fall for this? It just kind of seems hard for me to like make that. I just see how you can like fire him.
Like a Dave Roberts hot seat question with a 9-game division lead in late June.
That's true though. It's real. So somebody's gonna take the fall. Somebody's gonna take the fall, and I think it's gonna be Doc. I think he'll take he'll have to. I think he knows it, and he's been exceptional this year. He's been exceptional this year. His message has been on brand. His whole thing with the relief pitcher, that was huge. That was very, very big reception wise. I think he's had a great year, but I think he takes a fall.
Well, and his situation speaks to like this sort of in between place the team is in, right? Like he's got 1 year left on his deal after this. This is a guy who, like, if like you wrote about Plasch, like if they win the World Series this year, if he stays, like he's like the next Tommy Lasorda, or they lose and, you know, they try to negotiate a contract this winter and, you know, trying to do that with a guy who's like literally the winningest manager in the history of baseball, or at least he was before the Negro League stats were integrated into the stat book. A couple guys had better winning percentages than him. So he's now third. But like, again, like this is the state of the team. You have like the best manager, or one of the best or most successful managers in MLB history, who is having, like, I agree with you. This is probably one of his better seasons just in terms of taking a lot of the spotlight and the attention and the questions both on the field. And like, he's the one who answered most of the gambling related things for the team. Like this should be like the peak of his time with the Dodgers. And instead it's still feeling like this. Well, if you don't win this year, like where is the future with this team? Who's managing it? Like all those sorts of things come into play because of the place that they're in, to me, because of what they've done. And yet because of also like all these things that could still pop up and that you worry about when you start thinking about October with this group. All right. I got some superlative questions. You guys want to go to that? These are basic, but I was related to our ongoing title discussion about this show. I was told that the only problem from one reader, that the only problem with our show is that we don't actually debate enough on this. Like the name's good, just debate more. So I'm going to just lob these to you guys.
The name's good. Wait, somebody thinks the name's good?
Multiple people think the name is good. We got somebody tweeted at us today saying, don't change the name of the show. Who's your midseason MVP? I can't.
Ohtani. I vote Ohtani. It's got to be Ohtani.
Okay, see, fine. It's Tyler Glasnow. Like, think about how different of a conversation we'd be having right now if they did not have Tyler Glasnow leading the rotation. Like, that's where I'll leave it. We don't need to super debate these, but yes, Ohtani's probably been like the most productive.
Ohtani's the best player in baseball. Come on.
Sure. But we're gonna.
It's
This
not
is
like
gonna
the
be a
biggest.
semantic
It's not the
point
most
in terms of
calming. It's
value.
not the most calming influence. It's the most valuable player. Ohtani's the most productive guy.
Oh, to me,
No question.
to me,
Come on,
this
Jack.
team, if they didn't have Ohtani, they would have gotten somebody else this offseason. Still would have been a good lineup.
This is
If you didn't have
ridiculous.
Tyler Glasnow right now, I think there'd be like panic buttons
Oh
being
my
hit.
god, Flash! They say you and I are contrarians. What about
It's unbelievable, Jack. What are you talking about?
Most-
A picture. He's the best player in baseball.
mo-
He's got the MVP of his own team. Come on.
Sure.
All right,
sure.
Stephen A. Harris.
To this point, like this is a much different season if you don't have Tyler Glasnow doing what he's doing, beyond even more than Ohtani to me. Most disappointing player. This one, see, this is in your guys' wheelhouse.
Chris Taylor. I'm sorry. I was there when he did the home run to beat the Cardinals in the wild card game. I mean, people forget how great he's been for this team, what he's done. I was there when he made the great catch in Milwaukee to send him to the World Series. We've seen him. People forget how great he is and how incredibly struggling he is now. He's the most disappointing.
I'll go Kike Hernandez. When he's going well, he kind of brings like a certain energy to the team. And I think that, as his production has declined, he's also kind of shrunk kind of as a presence. So I think you kind of get it from both ends there.
This might
What do
be
you
harsh,
say, Jack?
but I'm
going
going
to say Ohtani.
He's not stealing as many bases as we thought. That's disappointing. Walker Buehler, and obviously a lot of that's out of his control.
Oh, it's easy. He was injured. Come on, you can't be
Well,
disappointed.
no, I know. I'm not.
You might as well blame Dr. Neil Electron. By the way.
Yeah,
but as he was coming back, like Walker Buehler's stuff still looked good, right? His fastball still in the mid 90s. His breaking stuff like still breaks. Like even he's talked about the characteristics of my pitches are still okay. And this was a guy like when we're talking about, hey, how do you bolster the front line of the rotation? Who's going to be making playoff starts for you? I think there was a lot of optimism, even internally, that Walker Buehler could be one of those guys.
he's coming off an injury, surgery. He's coming off surgery. You can't be disappointed coming off surgery.
But the fact that 8 starts in, they're having to hit the reset button, they're having to go this far backwards that he can't even be in the rotation right now, coupled with like this hip thing that is what technically landed him on the IL. I mean, again, I'm not like this is tricky doing this with an injured player, but I think that frankly, Chris Taylor, Kike Hernandez wasn't expecting a ton out of those guys this year. I think that the ceiling for Walker Buehler was still relatively high, and so far, like now it's like what do you if he can't figure things out mechanically? Like this is a guy with a lot of talent who
haven't there only been like 2 guys in the history of baseball that have coming back from 2 Tommy Johns?
Sure.
You're gonna go at a guy for not being able to be the
not
third
trying,
guy to
we're
ever
not
do
trying to
rehab.
go, we're not trying to go at him.
It'd be like if
we've
somebody
written a lot
tries to go to
about-
the moon now and doesn't make it there. It's like, oh, what a disappointment.
Hey,
He's
3 guys.
rehabbing, Jack. Come on.
Sure. But it's your
I wouldn't even argue that Buehler's like willingness to adapt is
That's
like
one of the best things
I
about
wasn't
the
even
season.
sure he
I
could do
agree.
that. I wasn't sure he could do that, and he has.
But it hasn't worked. Like that's like
Dylan.
right. There have been like 0
God,
very.
you know what this show needs to be called is Jack's Hot Takes.
Dylan, who's been your most disappointing Dodger beat writer so far this year?
Well, right now it's
Jack Harris, right now.
All right, best story of the season.
Best story.
Sunflower seeds. Teoscar Hernandez in the sunflower seeds.
I mean,
That's been
best
fun.
Story as in like positive or like
You can go players. You can go like what's. I mean, yes, it was designed as a positive question, but my faith in you to turn a positive question to a negative one is.
Well, like
Yeah.
Ipe is like, I mean, that's like Ocean's 11 type stuff, right? I mean,
Oh my God.
If you look, depending on how
Agreed.
you look at this, I mean, this guy was just kind of a nobody, and really like balled out for the last like 6-7 years, man. This guy was living as like a king.
So you're saying the best story, the fact that Ipe pled guilty
Oh,
to a felony.
It sounds like a compliment to law enforcement.
Yeah.
Quickly handling this situation.
So the FBI is Dylan thinks the FBI is the most valuable player for the Dodgers.
All right. Well,
IRS.
Gavin Stone's been the best story as a player for me, but the whole Johan Ramirez hug thing and the fact that he's like pitching leverage spots for them once a week right now and mostly
That's a great story.
has been incredible. Like this is a guy who like would hit like 8 of the first 10 batters he faced or whatever this year, and now is like getting big outs for them. Kind of cool. All right, last one. the most important storyline for this team over the second half of the season?
What they do at the trade deadline, because of the fact that they did nothing the last 2 years and got burned. What they do, they've got to do something. They have to, if only for show, they got to do something. So I think July 31st is the most important day, most important thing going forward.
I just kind of have a feeling that this is inevitably all going to lead to Clayton Kershaw taking the ball in the elimination game. So, I mean,
Maybe.
it happens. How does it keep happening? It happens every year. So I'll just say Kershaw's recovery.
But he's been shelved again, right? He's been shelved.
He has been. He has been.
There is time, but
but they sent him out there last year and his shoulder was gone.
Yeah, and
they'll
how did that
totally
go?
throw him under the bus like that if they have to.
What do you say, Jack?
I mean, it's kind of a combination of your two answers. Is there going to be a trustworthy number 2 starter? And maybe it's like Gavin Stone. I think the way he's pitched the last month, like he started getting strikeouts. I think he's really started to figure out what is still a relatively new pitch mix for him. Like, to me, this is a guy who, like, I would not be surprised if in October, like, he was lights out for, 2 or 3 weeks. I think it's very possible. I think Bobby Miller might be a longer shot, but at least has the stuff potential to kind of do that. Or you got to go out and add, whether it's getting a top guy like a Garrett Crochet, whether it's hitting right on, a longer bet like a Jack Flaherty. But if they don't have or maybe it's Yoshinobu Yamamoto coming back and being fully healthy and being what he was before. But like, if they can't nail any of those and all of those in their own way are kind of longer shot bets, it's going to be really tough for this team to win in October. Like, if we've learned anything the last couple of years, it's that you have to have 2 starters that you can depend on to make every turn in the rotation and do it well, to save your bullpen, to give you a chance to play with a lead, to do a myriad of other things that matter. And if they don't have that, which at the moment, like, they don't, like, there's not somebody that if there was a game 2 tomorrow, I think you would feel good about as a Dodger fan throwing out on the mound. And if that remains the case when they get to the playoffs, that's a really tough spot for a team to be in, especially one that, again, spent as much money and as much time this offseason trying to remake its pitching staff and looking at different options. And if they still can't get that balance right, whether it's because of injury luck or whatever else, that's going to be a failure roster building wise, and one that could, I mean, out of anything that could go wrong with this team, that's the one I think that presents the biggest impediment between them and getting to a World Series.
And I'll slightly amend mine. I mean, because we're kind of taking this for like granted that Glasnow is going to be there at the end of the season. I mean, it all has to start with your ace being available. So I would say, again, career high, what is it, 21 starts, career high.
He's coming up on his career high in innings pitched. And they're going to have to start saving an inning here or there, all that kind of stuff.
So to me, that's going to be the thing to watch, I guess.
Yeah. All right. Well, we were going to end the show by debating the title of the of our series here, but Dylan took care of that for us.
Yeah, Dylan, that's a horrible title, Dylan. That's horrible. Everybody's going to get it wrong. You're going to pronounce it wrong. We don't need that to be the title.
For Dylan Hernández, Bill Plaschke, and the great people of Bloomfield, Iowa, thank you guys for watching. We'll be back in a couple weeks to probably talk more about the deadline, I'm sure.